Not a person that's questioning or a person that's trying to figure stuff out, but what real atheists are. Part of what they're doing is they're revolting against hierarchy because they know that they are so ugly inside and that they belong at the bottom of the hierarchy and there's no way up for them. And so part of what they wanted, and this is a lot of like political and cultural labels that people apply to themselves. A lot of it is about just finding the shortest route to reversing the hierarchy so that they, in their shittiness, can be on top.
In recent days, YouTube had recommended a channel to me named Rhetorically Defective. Rhetorically Defective is just high-energy Pepe meme spam and victory laps for whoever currently holds momentum on the right wing. Hype man noise that consumes drama without creating anything in response. There's zero depth or any forward vision from his channel. Granted, that is what most of right-wingers are on YouTube nowadays, just performative hype and cheerleading for the current thing, except it's the current thing on our side of the political spectrum. The way YouTube works is that if anyone who wants to be grift adjacent to many of the mainline influencers, including right-wing influencers, well, you don't even need good takes. YouTube will just reward you for low-effort, high-engagement content, all optimized for retention through outrage and tribal affirmation. So all you really need to do is say, hey, see what that more popular guy over there said yesterday? Well, here's a clip from that person's content. And as a side, you get to listen to me hoop and holler a bit for that performative reactive tax. Anyway, that's not even what this video is about. I made this video because it came to my attention that Rhetorically Defective, or RD for short, had been targeting one Dave Greene, or the Distributist channel on YouTube. And for anyone who is unaware of who he is, Dave Greene is a person who invests in long-form exploration of a wide variety of political and social topics. Most of his streams and his videos are plotting. Sometimes he talks with other people, or he just has a topic he wants to go on about for a few hours, and all in all, it just isn't the most lucrative thing for high-octane users on the platform. But Dave does have his niche. Now, I want to precursor what I talk about next by addressing a phenomenon known as context collapse.
So when you send a tweet out into the world, initially it hits people who are only following you, and they've given their consent to get that message. If one of them retweets it, which is kind of what you want to happen, that tweet is then introduced to a new audience and a new context. This sounds harmless, but it can be anything but. This audience doesn't know you or have any context of what you might have meant by the words you wrote. That means they can misinterpret it, engage in bad faith, or pretend to be outraged for the sake of looking good to others. This is why joke tweets are taken literally and question replies are seen as attacks on people. Look, I'm not saying that every bad taste joke is above questioning or every response isn't a reply guy, but I am saying that we are increasingly losing our ability to give our posts context as they go out to too many audiences.
It is a phenomenon that describes how different audiences have all flattened into one on social media now, which has made a lot of the more nuanced speech on the platform risky. And this is because if you have a clip made for one group or one demographic on YouTube, that clip can also be taken out of context by others who have no idea what they're talking about or have no idea what the speaker is talking about. And as I'll cover in the case of RD and Dave Greene, this kind of thing can be weaponized by critics. And as I've talked about a little bit so far, the thing about Dave Greene is that his content does not lend itself to clip economy. Clip economy being a dynamic that favors performers and disruptors over actual builders. Clip economy content is really what hype men like RD thrive on. Now, this is a structural problem with YouTube in general. This isn't relegated to just a few individuals and bad actors. But for a bit more context to what I'm talking about here, throughout the last decade or so, we've seen that there has been a shift where short, decontextualized video clips have become the primary unit of online content consumption. And while long-form content still has its place here, there are still many who recognize clippable content is more important or more profitable than long-form content. Now, what that's done is it's caused creators and clippers to increasingly optimize their speech patterns, and their pacing, and all their arguments for maximal snippability. And by the way, that's something Nick Fuentes is particularly good at, and why he would never survive in a political realm that was divorced from social media. Because what Nick does is he creates these punchy, high-octane moments that work well as standalone 15 to 60-second excerpts. Algorithms on YouTube, on TikTok, on X, Instagram, etc., they heavily reward these fragments, and that creates a self-reinforcing system, something that we have to deal with today. And there are a variety of figures who speak in ways that all exploit how people consume these snippets rather than anything in full context.
You are one more bad decision away from becoming the northernmost member of the Global South.
What's this guy, crazy?
Is he just sitting there all day clipping this?
Yeah.
It's so thoroughly clipped.
Almost as much as I do Indians, almost.
Wow.
His clipping strategy, we got to get with that. I think that's important.
So bearing all that in mind, I made a community post about RD's recent back and forth with the Distributist, and from there, I don't need to work very hard to narrow down exactly what the problem was. After I tagged RD in my community post, this was his very first response. Oh yeah, dude, like his "there's no commies in 2026" take. Brilliant. He really thought that through when he explains it with either going back to the 1910s or Starship Trooper. Such a high level and relevant analysis, lol. Now, of course, if you listen to Dave Greene, you know this isn't true. And no, it's not the fact that he said what he said, he did, but it happened on X. And RD took that quote out from a vast context. And by the way, if you are someone who would rather not dig into the context, well, you can always use AI to do it for you. And by the way, when I say use AI, make it your search engine. Demand receipts. Now, what you'll find is that Dave was in fact not claiming that no one on the left calls themselves a communist or that communist ideas have vanished. No, his point was more precise. What he was referring to was classical, serious, revolutionary communism. In other words, the more ideologically rigorous version from the early 20th century. And again, you would only know this if you listen to Dave Greene on a regular basis. You can't just clip this out of context. Okay, so originally I was just going to post a video generalizing this entire exchange, but instead I'm going to read this aloud so you know the exact context for everything and you can make determinations on your own, of course. This was posted on May 19. This is where all the drama started. Dave Greene says, "The fact that this video is titled 'The Internet is Failing the Left' tells you a lot about the psychological/ideological differences between left and right, much in the mode of Zizek. If I, or any other right-winger, were to make a video similar to Burns, criticizing some larger creator like Matt Walsh, we would never title it, 'The Internet is Failing the Right.' It's not even that my arguments against Walsh would necessarily be different than Burns' arguments against Wynne. It's that 'the Internet is failing the right' reads like a grammatically incorrect sentence. The non-volitional object is the active subject. The political agent is the passive object. This is not correct linguistically. The correct language would read how the right is failing to use the internet, or how our enemies who run the internet are attacking the right. All this goes to show that the modern left sees itself as a passive object that is acted upon. It cannot fail. It can only be failed. Capitalism and oppression happen to the left, and that's bad. Maybe in the future, change and revolution will happen to the left, and that will be good. But the left doesn't do things. Doing things is not what the left does. It isn't that kind of thing. The left is like a tree in the storm that is capitalism/modernity. The rain and the wind are happening to it. Maybe it survives or doesn't, but the action is that of the storm. The right is like a ship sailing through the storm that is capitalism/modernity. It cuts through the tempest. Maybe it survives or doesn't, but the action is on the part of the ship. So as you can see, this post isn't even talking about communism per se, but about how language is used and about how it informs the types of thinking employed by different peoples on different sides of the political spectrum. This is why I personally enjoy Dave's work, because he's someone who has keen insights about language and about how speech works. And so in response to this, the most most appropriate mode of engagement would be to talk about the way speech works and how to formulate our own speech in ways that might be a bit more helpful than what is currently employed by many on the right. However, RD interjects with this mid-wit Redditor tier comment in response. Rhetorically defective. Burns is a communist in normie clothing. So already you can see there's a deep insecurity on display here on RD's part. Dave, as we know, occupies a niche that values very slow, methodical thought. And instead of respecting that niche from a distance, RD seems intimidated by someone who actually knows what he's talking about. And so his instinct here is to drag Dave down to his level of reactive discourse. Notice the use of the term normies, for instance. But of course, Dave doesn't play that game. He continues to speak with the same precision and depth as he always does. And by the end, we'll see RD defaults to a petty insult. So I want to make it clear here, what RD is doing is not in any way, shape, or form a pursuit of truth. This is all an attempt to level the playing field by pulling far superior thinkers than himself into the mud.
A lot of it is about just finding the shortest route to reversing the hierarchy so that they, in their shittiness, can be on top.
Dave Greene. Ha 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 ha. You mean he wishes he was a communist? No one is a communist in 2026. There is no active communist party arming workers to destroy the state. Rhetorically defective. He's closer to a communist than Trump is a Nazi. If Kyle Rittenhouse is a Nazi, then the guy constantly analyzing everything through Marxist perspective that lines up perfectly with all the post-queer neo-Marxist surely could be considered a communist. Randall Smith. Calling him a communist imbues him with a prestige he absolutely doesn't deserve. I think Lenin when I hear communist. Lenin would kill Burns. Rhetorically defective. What communist wouldn't Lenin kill? Rhetorically defective. I feel like I won't get an answer, further solidifying the criticism. Dave Greene. Well, again, it depends how you use the words. We are trying to trade out the distinction between two types. Rhetorically defective. It appears to be a distinction without a difference consequentially. It's an odd time to have a purity argument when they have over a century of infiltration in our institutions. Dave Greene. I don't see the stakes as very high in this question. It doesn't make much difference in political coalitions. The distinction is important if you want to understand how different communists think about the world. Rhetorically defective. I'm already understanding how different communists think about the world. But what exactly does that do when the end result is so similar? By the way, I'm not even trying to be antagonistic or combative. If I come across as so, it's just my disdain for commies through my content. Dave Greene. I hate commies too, obviously. It's just really clear to me that these Burns types are a different breed than the piker third worldists. Rhetorically defective. Different how? To me, they feel similar enough to lump together. Sure, no one is more bald, but it doesn't seem very relevant. Dave Greene. We are going in circles, but they arrive at communism for different reasons, and therefore have different psychological reactions to attacks. Rhetorically defective. You speak rather ideologically. Can you map any examples onto reality of what you're describing to break the circle we may be in? Dave Greene. I could illustrate my point via historical example or via reference to Starship Troopers, if that helps. Rhetorically defective. Please, for whatever higher power you appeal to, don't use a movie when I ask for a real-world example. I'm very concerned with how these concepts are interacted with modern day, so I'll have to take the historical example. Talk to me like I'm 5 and try to be modern. Dave Greene. So in the late 1910s, early 1920s, after the October Revolution, there were these groups of effeminate intellectuals and mostly Jewish women in Western Europe who would dress up like Bolsheviks and call themselves the Communist Party and pretend to do revolutionary things while spending their families' money. Then there were actual Bolsheviks in Russia who were staging a military coup, assassinating aristocrats, and shooting counter-revolutionaries and peasants, and fighting an insanely bloody civil war. These groups had almost no contact, except sometimes the former would send money to the latter, and the latter would call the former useful idiots. Now you could call both of these groups communists if you wanted to, and in some sense you'd be correct. But these were not the same kinds of people, and calling the LARPing Jewish women communists kind of plays into their LARP about being Lenin's army. That's what I'm saying about Burns. Rhetorically defective. Do you understand the equivocation with comparing 1920s N-words with 2020 N-words? You understand how these concepts manifest differentially throughout history, right? With respect, it seems like you're applying an archaic analysis to a modern problem. Dave Greene. Maybe, but these two sides of communism always seem to appear together and in opposition throughout history. Like the north and south poles of a magnet, their opposition seems fundamental to what communism is. Maybe this time is different, but I doubt it. By the way, the reason I am insisting on drawing the linguistic distinction instead of grouping is tactical. The effeminate LARPer communists get off with their confusion with the looting thug communists. You must never let these people escape what they are, which is useful idiots. Rhetorically defective. What exactly is tactical about your approach, though? Sure, they're useful idiots, but they think they're communists. Communist praxis always intercedes with contradictions, which they embrace. You help them by discouraging a title they claim and historically fulfill. Dave Greene. Because there is something symbolically essential about the connection between the two groups. By breaking that connection, the communist cycle could in some sense be disrupted, at least hypothetically. Rhetorically defective. I don't think you beat the communists hypothetically. That's a home game for that. All they are is hypothetical. That's why I focus on the reality and consequentialist material reality of communist thought. That's where they become lolcows. In reality, they lose all the away games. Dave Greene. Okay. Rhetorically defective. You're fat. Dave Greene. Ha, you're trying to start a fight. Rhetorically defective. Why respond with okay? Don't be dismissive in a convo that had candor just to leave a disregarding response. Just say nothing. But you had no counterpoint, so you became dismissive. I understand how you have fallen off. Dave Greene. I don't know. Didn't we both kind of explain our positions? Seemed like a good stopping point to me. Rhetorically defective. You came to an argument you had no response to, so you said okay. It's a lack of character to escape a concession with a dismissive response. If you're actually autistic, I apologize. Dave Greene. You're pressing me on an abstract distinction, but then say you aren't concerned with abstractions. I just don't even understand what we are fighting about. I think this abstract thing might be valuable, and you don't. There is literally no reason to fight about the difference. Rhetorically defective. You introduce the abstraction that is meaningless. I push back on it to the point where you have nothing to say for yourself. Then you act like the conversation never had to happen in the first place. This is why you have fallen off. Dave Greene. Okay, whatever, you win. So if we break this down a bit, we know that RD started this entire ball rolling by interjecting with a non sequitur, because the original post was about language, it was about speech. Nevertheless, Dave decided to engage with him. And later on, RD positions himself as some kind of eager student. Explain it to me, talk to me like I'm 5. He acts like he genuinely wants Dave's deeper insight about this. And that's a common rhetorical move. It makes him appear like he's open-minded, and it puts the burden on Dave to perform. But when Dave actually delivered exactly what was asked for, a detailed historical analogy to distinguish the more performative Western leftists from real revolutionary communists, RD stops engaging with it. Even though he asked about historical relevancy, he dismisses history as being irrelevant. This is 2026. It's the current year. Didn't you demand a modern, simplistic example? But then you see he tries to sound intellectual himself by pushing this distinction without a difference argument. And I think this flip actually tells you everything you need to know about RD. He didn't actually want any methodological depth from Dave. All he wanted to do was set up for a dunk or portray Dave as overly abstract or out of touch. The entire thing was a bad faith engagement. Because Dave's historical methodology is well suited for understanding how the enemy actually thinks and operates. If you distinguish between serious ideological actors and LARPers, that helps avoid overestimating the threat or giving the enemy any unearned gravitas. But this all goes over RD's head. What he's doing is performing intellectualism while rejecting any actual intellectual tools when they don't serve the own the libs, they're all commies narrative that plays out far better with his audience. It's not about truth-seeking, it's not about coming to an understanding, it's about winning in the moment. He puts on the persona of humility as bait, and then he switches to attack mode when your answer doesn't fit the clip-friendly script. And then when that fails him, what does he do? He resorts to personal insults? you're fat. It just reinforces my original critique, as well as my response to him on my community post. It's less about substantive disagreement and more about maintaining this hype man role on YouTube. You're constantly judging others, you're not building anything, and you're not actually submitting to any of the harder work of thinking through any complex realities. So basically what Dave was saying, that the kind of communism he's talking about is effectively dead as a coherent, organized threat in the West, in the current year, and that what we have today is more of a fragmented, postmodern, cultural, identitarian left. It's more nihilistic and consumerist, and it's more focused on identity politics than on the more traditional Marxist economic analyses or revolutionary organizations. And yes, this is in stark contrast with leftists in the past. That is the context. By saying there are no communists in 2026, he is arguing that constantly framing the contemporary left as 1917 Bolsheviks is outdated or strategically unhelpful, and that the enemy has mutated into something different, and in some ways much harder to fight directly by using old categories. Now, everything I just said there would not fit within a snippet, would not fit within a clip, would not fit within a small frame on X, and that's why RD can't handle it.
This audience doesn't know you or have any context of what you might have meant by the words you wrote. That means they can misinterpret it, engage in bad faith, or pretend to be outraged for the sake of looking good to others.
But this fits within Dave's broader worldview, which you would only get if you listen to him over time. He has many videos and many streams where he has critiqued both historical communism and modern liberalism and progressivism. All the while he does advocate for another way, something centered on widespread Christian-based social order. And it's that final bit being the real reason I believe RD doesn't like him. Because, from what I've also gathered, RD is also a self-described atheist. Now, if you're looking for the closest full explanations on Dave's views on the evolution of leftism, communism, you can check out his video on how socialism enslaves millions. Also check out his Substack essay, Letter to a Late Marxist. All of that goes deeper into why he sees classical Marxism as intellectually bankrupt. The Distributist content cannot be conventionally clip-farmed for hot takes. It isn't drama fodder, as much as RD wants to force that. Now, another thing I wanted to address here is, why did all this drama start in the first place? Well, Dave had allegedly said disparaging things about RD, so I looked into that, and I found this exchange on X. So the way this started was that Dave had been in a back and forth with RD on X about defining what communism was, and later RD announced that he was going to do a stream about Dave critiquing him, and Dave offered to appear on RD's stream or host him on his own channel. RD declined and proceeded to stream anyway. Now, while that stream was happening, or shortly thereafter, Dave reportedly only watched part of that stream, but he couldn't finish it. And in that same stream, RD was reacting to organizations that Dave had previously recommended or linked to him. And these groups are focused on real-world community building and culture. In other words, these are things that align with Dave's emphasis on action beyond just the online talk. Now, because Dave had not watched the entire stream, he misinterpreted RD's tone and comments about those organizations as being negative or dismissive. So that led him to posting a comment on X warning people not to be dissuaded from getting involved with those organizations, all because of what RD had supposedly said about them. Now, RD pushed back on this with clips showing he had actually spoken positively about the organizations, to which Dave admitted he misconstrued RD's attitude, and he amended the comment and he formally apologized. And here I'll read this out loud. Dave Greene says, "Now certainly you do not have to like my content. I know it's niche. You don't even have to like me. Nevertheless, I want to implore everyone to think more about what they can do to build community and culture in real life. Do not let the unkind words spoken by RD," and here his amendment. "I think I misconstrued RD's attitude to these organizations when checking in on the stream. I will retract that any unkind words were said by RD, and I apologize for this inaccuracy." Then he goes on to say about the organization sent him links to dissuade you. "There are very good people working in those organizations who are doing good work every day. And I encourage people get involved, if not with those organizations, with people in your community." So let's make things clear here. Dave publicly owned a mistake he had made and he apologized for it. However, RD had already committed to and recorded a long stream called Deceit the Distributist. Even though the apology happened, instead of dropping it, RD used the apology itself as fresh material, framing it as some kind of proof that Dave was slippery and untrustworthy. And that's where I have a problem with this entire matter. It's not even about the fact that I am a huge supporter of the Distributist. Do I really need to explain to you how scummy RD is for doing this? Once again, Dave publicly apologized. He didn't hide it in DMs, and he didn't sugarcoat anything. But instead of accepting the apology in good faith, Dave's apology just became another clip for RD to dunk on rather than to bring this entire drama to closure. So just to make it clear, that was the moment where any sympathy I might have had for RD just went out the window. And this is regardless, by the way, of RD being an atheist. You see, the thing about atheists on the right is they're still compelled to draw from Christian capital in order to sustain themselves. I mean, even Richard Dawkins admits this. So given that, it's a wonder why RD wouldn't at least see the wisdom in accepting that apology and just resolving this conflict, especially with someone he has also publicly recognized as being such a worthwhile influencer.
Does Dave organize, and is he great for the right wing? IRL? Absolutely. Does he help people? Yeah. Do I help people? Yeah. Does he help more people? Yeah. Does he help more people in person? Yeah. I make it explicitly clear what I am criticizing. I am not taking any of his accomplishments away from him. I'm being asked over and over again what this is about, and he's admitting to not caring about mischaracterizing me. So can I please respond? Does he do great work? Absolutely. Does he do better work than me? Absolutely. Is he better at organizing people in person than I am? Absolutely. I'm not criticizing that. I'm not taking it away from him. I'm venerating him for doing so. Yes, absolutely. Okay? I don't like being mischaracterized. And I'm trying to let people know that I'm being mischaracterized because he has a larger platform. Not taking away his advocacy. Not telling anybody to not join his groups that he's helped organize and is affiliated with. There's publications, there's homesteading, similar to Return to the Land. I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that. I venerate that. It's something I'm too much of a pussy to do and don't have the resources to do. Everyone has their role. Everyone has their place. That's not the criticism.
So no, this isn't even a matter of forgive because Christ forgives. It's forgive because all this petty infighting just makes your movement weaker. Instead, however, as we see, RD just chose to boost his engagement metrics, and I don't think that will bode well with him in the long run. Other things to be made aware of here is that he has made videos on the aristocratic utensil. He covered Spoon's more spurgy reactions on X, for instance. And this led to my working theory that what RD is doing is just scalp hunting for content. If I were paranoid, I might even suspect this is Fed-adjacent grifting. Stuff that's just desperately trying to keep the right wing fractured and ineffective online. People like RD more closely resemble the Pharisees of the Gospels, self-appointed guardians of purity who loudly denounce minor deviations and outward cringe, all the while exempting themselves from any equivalent scrutiny. You know, Pharisees were Jews that burdened others with intricate rules, all the while they neglected any mercy or self-examination. And Jesus' analogy for this was, you clean the outside of the cup while the inside remains filthy. My only advice here is for anyone who listens to RD is don't mistake this performative dunking on people like Fuentes, like Spoon, or like Dave for any moral or intellectual superiority, even if any of those people actually deserve it. RD is addicted to the thrill of condemnation rather than the harder work of building, which is why it is laughable that he would compare himself to Dave. I think C.S. Lewis nailed this in The Abolition of Man when he warned about the men without chests. These are people who train themselves to see through everything while having nothing substantive to boast about within themselves. They wield skepticism as a universal solvent. Everything sacred or earnest can be reduced, mocked, or even seen through to its basest motives, right? But getting back to the clip farm aspect of this, a clip farm mentality is a low IQ mentality. You can probably train yourself out of it by getting off certain sections of the internet. Maybe you could go read a book, or you can listen to long-form content on podcasts or in videos. But if you can't, then your brain is going to rot, and that's the root of it. RD can't steel man or outthink actual intellectuals, so instead, he works with what faculties he's trained. Clip the spurgy moments, yell hysterically, spam Pepe memes to induce a mode of ironic detachment, and position yourself as some kind of no BS arbiter of people who talk about things you will never understand. And I'll even go as far as to say RD fits a latter-day offshoot of the skeptical tradition of years past, that Pickle Rick Redditor energy that the early alt-right often clashed with. Remember those old skeptic, atheist circles who lost their cultural momentum to the more serious right-wing currents that were willing to engage with real history and Christian identity? By the way, I was also called a leftist for just disagreeing with him, telling him he ought to talk with Dave. So what exactly does RD think right-wing behavior actually is? Is it purity enforcement? Is it this relentless cringe detection? Is it drama-driven destruction of anyone who shifts the Overton window? And as far as I'm aware, Dave's offer to have him on his channel still stands. And as of this video, RD has not taken him up on that. And this final part will probably fall on deaf ears, considering the nature of your channel, but RD, here's some straight advice. Good faith requires that when someone apologizes and corrects the record, you just accept it and move on. Even if you suspect that their motives were bad, or if you think their apology was imperfect somehow. This is just the way that adults resolve disputes. But your entire approach has been bad faith from the very beginning, and here's how I know this. You took a fragment of one of Dave Greene's X posts, which was obviously part of a larger conversation, you stripped it of all context, and then you responded to my community post demanding that I judge a man based on what is essentially a soundbite. No intelligent person operates that way. Reactionaries operate that way. So you insulted my intelligence by expecting me to just react like I'm another Clipsburg, and that's exactly why my response insulting you back was well warranted. Your old clip first, drama second style won't expose deceit at face value. In fact, all it really does is just reveal your own intellectual limitations.